starting with a brief tutorial on removing backgrounds from images. Now the first thing is, if you have saved your image and opened it in Photoshop, in order to remove the background from it, what you would actually need to do is turn it into a layer. At the moment, if you see where my mouse is moving, you'll see that the layer is actually locked. So to unlock the layer, you need to double click it. You'll get this dialog box here that will come up. Now you should name your layer, so I'm going to name this layer Pufferfish, which I will spell correctly, and I'm going to click OK. So the little lock symbol that was over here has now gone and has been replaced with nothingness, a void. We like voids. So looking at erasing the background from your picture, for a lot of people, natural choice would be to go straight to the eraser tool. And we click on the eraser tool. I'm going to turn the size of my brush up just so that we can actually see it. Let's go a bit further. Okay, let's go silly size. Maybe not that silly. Okay, so do that, and then we start erasing, and we come down, and oh, and I have just chopped part of the fin of my pufferfish off. Now, okay, I've done this quite extreme as an example of what can happen, but even if you're taking your time, going really carefully with the eraser tool, you would have to have the world's steadiest hand to get a good cutout done. And usually what you'll find is you'll end up with a line that sort of bumps like that, but obviously on a much smaller scale. So the eraser tool has its uses. There are times when it does come in really useful if you are not trying to get a very specific and accurate line. But in terms of cutting stuff out, in general, it's probably best not to use it. Now, don't forget, in Photoshop, when we go backwards, we use Control-Alt-Z, so we can go back more than one step. Now, another reason why we don't use the eraser tool is because if we don't realise that we've cut something off and we're 20-30 steps down the line in making a composite image, we tend to find that we then can't go far enough back to undo the damage. And once we've erased something with the eraser tool, it's gone. We cannot get that data back. You have to go back to the original picture and start all over again. So the eraser tool, those tools out for close work. Now, if we want a general shape, what we could use is the Elliptical Marquee tool, or any of these Marquee tools will work. I'm going to use the Elliptical Marquee tool, and I actually have a feather set on here which will make the edge soft. That's fully changeable. If you click on where it says feather, you can drag it up to make it bigger, drag it left to make it smaller. So right big, left small. I'm just going to leave it there. And then we click and drag to do our marquee. Now you will not see the feathered edge on that marquee. And what we could do is we could just delete the background. So if we were going to do this and delete the background, we would right click inside our selection and tell it to select inverse. And what you should get is that dotted line going all the way around the outside of the square of your picture. And then we can press the delete key. Works quite well. If I deselect that, Control D for quick deselect. Works quite well. We've got the nice soft edge, we've got pufferfish in the circle. But what if we didn't want to cut off this section of its tail? Same with the eraser tool, we can't go back. That data is gone. And if we realise, however many steps down the line, we might not be able to Control-Alt-Z far enough back. So it does work, but again, not necessarily the best option. So I've gone back to my circle, and now let's find out what a much better option would be for removing background. So what I would like you to look at here, as well as the main image, is keep an eye on this icon, this thumbnail over here. If I go forward a couple of steps, you can see the background on it has disappeared, and you can see that checkerboard that we see over here. If I go back, and then what we're actually going to do is we're going to apply something called a layer mask. This is down on the bottom of the layers palette. It's a white square with a little dark circle in it. Click on that. Our thumbnail hasn't changed. All of the information from the picture is still there. What has changed is we now have a second thumbnail in black and white, and that is our layer mask. Anything that is black is hiding what is underneath it on our full data picture. Anything that's white is visible. And an even better thing about this layer mask is that you can use shades of grey as well. So if I pick up a nice shade of grey and I get my paintbrush tool, I now can paint in something that is semi-transparent. I could use the flood fill tool. I could change brightness and contrast to do this as well, but you can build in for things to be semi-transparent without affecting, again, the background data like you would if you set the opacity on the eraser tool. So it is a very useful tool, especially if you then find you need to go and change things. So let's say I found out that I've done this all wrong and I need to do it as a square instead of a circle. I can right click on just the layer mask and I can delete the layer mask. It's gone. We're back to our original image. If we go backwards again, if I just need to see part of the image that's hidden, so I need to see something up here to maybe select it, I can disable the layer mask, pick up the bit that I want, go re-enable layer mask, and then I could flood fill that area. So that is an option. I'm just going to delete this layer mask very quickly for a second. So those marquee tools are fine if you want a preset shape. But what about if I wanted to just have the pufferfish? That's when we come to these tools, so the next one's down. You've got your lasso tool. You need to have a really steady hand to use a lasso tool. Most people are probably not going to have a hand steady enough to click and hold the left mouse button and drag the mouse around an entire shape, and you will get a very, very wavy edge. Magnetic lasso tool can be quite good, can be quite useful, but you have to be aware of your contrast. So if we were to look at our pufferfish here, on the edge of that fin, and we look at the rock behind it, there's not a lot of difference between those two there. And what you might find as you go around there is you will lose part of that fin. You might come out into the rock, or it might follow this darker edge round and then jump over here and still cut that bit off. So the tool that I tend to use and that I recommend using is the Polygonal Acetal tool. So let's select that one and quickly look at how we use it. Z on the keyboard just to zoom in a bit. The more you zoom in, the easier it will be to get a nice line. I'm obviously doing this quite quickly, so I'm not going to zoom in too far. And our Polygonal Lasso tool is pretty easy to use. You click to set your start point. When you move your mouse, you will get a line that will come off. If you need to move your picture, you just go slowly and nudge the sides. And then you just move to follow your shape. You click, move, click, move, and so on, all the way around. Now, you may think that this is going to give you a very blocky square shape, but it's actually not, because while I'm going around here, if you look at the top where the tool options are, you'll see that beside where it has the feather options, which at the moment is set to 0, there is also an option for anti-lace. The anti-lace settings, if that is ticked, is what is going to stop this from having very square edges. It will smooth those edges off. So if you were using a vector tool, you would use handles coming off your anchor points. In raster, we use something called anti-lace. Now, I'm getting to quite a complicated bit. So when you get to the complicated bit, slow down, take your time. If your computer thinks that you have double-clicked, it will close your line for you. And that is not going to be helpful or conducive to what you're doing. Now, obviously, I'm going around here quite quickly. The more you zoom in and the more time you take, the better your line will be. You don't really want to be rushing this if you want a good, clean cutout with any edges on it, with no edges on it even. So we go around, and we'll just finish this off. So when it comes to closing, you can either double click from your last point if you need to go in a straight line, Or you can move your mouse until you get a little circle on the bottom right hand corner. And when you click on that, you will get the dotted marquee going round. That is that shape selected. So let's just zoom out so we can see the effect. Center it over a bit as well. So I now have my puffer fish. I can apply a layer mask directly to that. That will completely get rid of the background. But what we can actually do, in addition to this, or instead of doing that, is we can apply effects directly to our background and keep our pufferfish looking the same. So for that, we would use something called an adjustment layer. It's right next to the layer mask. It will use our selection to create the adjustment layer and for what to apply it to. And anything we do at the moment will be applied to the pufferfish. So we want to change it to the background. Now I've clicked off my selection tools up here. I've gone onto my zoom tool. So I'm just going to go to select and inverse. And then I'm going to come here. Now, there's lots of different options. I'm not going to sit and go through each one of them because we haven't got time. But I'm going to go and do a hue saturation. Now, you'll notice our dotted line has vanished. But if we look on our layers, a new layer has come up. It's got that little half-coloured circle on it. Hue saturation 1. And I'm just going to drag the saturation down. So on our layer mask, we've got black, which is masked out. So what you do on this layer isn't going to affect the black area, but the white area has gone to grayscale. So we have selected that with that. And you know, there are various things you can play about. You can change the lightness of the image, you can change the colour, which if you've got saturation down doesn't do much. You can change the colour. And you can use it to get various different tools. What I could also do is I could duplicate this layer so that I don't have to cut the shape of my pufferfish again. And I could apply a different filter. So I'm going to go to posterize. Now that's applied it to the entire layer because we don't have anything on this layer mask yet. The more levels you have, the more detail you have in your picture. So if you look here, while I move the slider, you can see it changes. I'm going to turn this right down to probably about 9. That looks good. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to click on this layer mask to select it. I'm going to drag it up onto the layer above with the posterize, replace the layer mask, delete this hue saturation one. And now we have a posterized background in grayscale. If I click on the layer mask again, press Ctrl and I on my keyboard, that will invert it. You won't see it on the pufferfish because the pufferfish is masked underneath. To see it, you need to drag it below. And hopefully it will catch up and posterize the pufferfish at some point. Oh yeah, it has done it. As if I hide it, you can see the change. But the layers haven't shown up very well. So let's just edit this. And we'll take the number of layers down so we can actually see the effect on the pufferfish. There we go. So we can use them for that effect as well. Now, the layers stack. So whatever you have applied here, if you're using our color tools, our adjustment layers, will apply to all the layers underneath it, including the layer masks. So if I disable this layer mask, you can see the posterizer is affected to all of it because there's nothing blocking it, but the grayscale is only affected to the area that is not masked off. And there's lots of different things that you can try with this, so have a play around, see what you can do.